It's August 29th, and I left off giving a little preface of what I was doing, what I was studying, before I went up to the monastery. And once there, I began volunteering at the library. I actually didn't volunteer. I started talking to one of the librarians who worked there, and he asked if I'd be interested in helping out with the project. And it was to index a bunch of books that were fairy tales. He was working on his second part of an index for fairy tale compilations. So I helped him with that, and his name is Joseph Sprague. And I also met a couple of other monks, although I pretty much just kept to myself and was studying. The very first day I was there, I bought some books. They had a used book section, and I bought a couple of books. And I actually don't hardly remember what they were, but one of them was something like the 12 Steps to the Cross, to Love, or something like that. And I can't remember, it was kind of an old-fashioned book, and it was short, but it was, I thought the language was nicely written. That sounds sort of awkward. It was a well-written book, and kind of concise. So I basically started studying there on my own, and I, with my background at going to a Christian school, private Christian school for a while, and having a dress code, of skirts below the knees, no sleeveless shirts, that sort of thing, I knew, and having gone to church almost my entire life, I knew it was appropriate to wear to monastery, and in fact, I was even more covered up, more conservative there. And also, I think in part because I wanted to cover my body, because I felt sort of self-conscious after some of the things, after the incidents that had happened to me. So I don't want to get into too much detail, but what basically happened was sort of an inappropriate situation, and I was very bewildered because I didn't know anything about monasteries or monks or the Catholic Church and what a monk could do or not do, and what they're permitted to do and say, and that sort of thing. And so I was really in very unfamiliar territory. So it was definitely exotic. I definitely got the whole otherworldly sort of experience there. But I became concerned about a couple of things, and I tried to do them. And it was very distressing at one point, after a year of kind of befriending a couple people and then feeling like something wasn't very honest or forthright about the conduct or speech of you. So, and then once I tried to talk about it to one priest, Father Joachim McCann, he sort of gave me sort of veiled threats, I felt, and cautions not to go to the abbot, and so I decided to do it. So I reported it to the abbot, thinking that's what I should do, and I mean, not to be a nuisance, but I actually really went to him not just to report something, but to ask for information as to, well, is this appropriate? Is this okay or not? I mean, I didn't know. And what are their rules and policies and that kind of thing. And basically I realized after that it was, they got nervous. It was right around the time that I think people were coming out of the woodwork with clergy sex abuse cases and sex exploitation, that kind of thing. And all of a sudden, I guess they did feel that I did have some sort of a legal cause or claim, because they began treating me like I was a legal adversary, even though I hadn't filed anything and I hadn't said I was going to file, hadn't even considered filing anything initially. So right away, they really began treating me very badly. I was kind of set up. They had me calling one person and another person and just going around in circles for months, and then after being exasperated, then one time they told me to call Brother Anzar Santa Rosa, the person that I was talking about, and I remember he answered the phone and said, it was the first time I'd ever called him my entire life. And even though I'd met him in person, I'd never called him there. And he said, I consider calls, first he let me call, and then he hung up, so I thought maybe it was a mistake, and then I called back, and he said, I consider calls from you to be harassment, I will treat them as such. And I was stunned, totally shocked. I mean, I consider calls from you to be harassment? I had never called him in my life. He was implying that I had been calling him, he was being harassed, and I think that is when I realized something was really wrong, and it had been a different priest that told me to call him, and I'm like, I don't know if I should call him, I don't think that that's a good idea. He kept urging me to do it, and I do the first time, and then that's what I got. And I just felt right away that that was probably a recorded call that was being saved to try to make me sound like I was some harassing person, when I wasn't. And then I found out, and then I guess my suspicions about that were confirmed when I found out from an officer that they had somebody had reported me to the police of Mount Angel, the town of Mount Angel, and said to put me under investigation. And I was absolutely, I was shocked. There is no word to describe what I thought and felt, because there was nothing on my part in my conduct or actions or anything that would rise to the level of going to a police department and talking to a police about me. And this officer said, your name has been on the board for months. I said, what do you mean my name has been on the board? They basically put my name on a board in the police station as like one to watch. I mean, for example, this is like kind of, I don't know, in a sense it's almost military-like, because it's like they're putting my name like a strategy, like a target, and then what are they doing with my name on the board? Just remember this name? I mean, do they have my face on the board too? Am I, like, what, photos of me walking up to the Abbey and back? So I asked, I said, why would anybody do that? And he said, well, they claim that you're unstable and you're a danger and violent, potentially violent. All of these things were totally untrue, never gave any indication of any of those things whatsoever, and in fact, I was still working for them as their volunteer. I was still volunteering for them. I was still working for them, doing their I think about it now, retarded fairy tale index, which wasn't retarded, but, you know, honestly, in the context of what they were doing to me, it was absolutely crazy that I'm sitting there working on fairy tales for the Mount Angel Abbey Monastery while they're calling me nuts and potentially violent. So then the next thing that happened is I was at Multnomah County Public Library for some reason. to get other books, like not religious books. I don't remember what it was, but I was there for some reason. And I still went there on a rare occasion, but I really had made kind of that Abbey library my home, in a sense of having privacy. So the next thing that happened is I was parked outside of that Multnomah County Library, and somebody broke into my car. I started having tons of car vandalisms, and probably that was, I can go back and say that was one of the first. That was around I did have a coat stolen in 1994 on May Day from a parking lot that was across the street from the Bullivant Hauser Bailey law firm, which I wasn't even involved with then, and I didn't even know that they represented the Abbey. I had not even been to the Abbey yet, so it was very strange because I was right across the street from them, but at that time I had nothing to do with them. So who they knew, or maybe whether they were involved or not, I'm not sure. However, then later I'm outside of this, these car vandalisms then began to happen almost all the time. And, oh gosh, I think my head is still cut off. Sorry about that. I really cannot figure out the angles of this camera lens, and it drives me nuts. So, I hadn't even been to... Oh, so anyway, I was having all these car vandalisms, and my car was broken into and a bunch of books were taken. Well, there were books strewn all across the street and across my car, like across the seat and across the street. And I walked outside and I was just aghast because my books were everywhere. So I put everything back in my car, and I believe I reported it to police. I reported the break-in, and then went on my way, and then later, about a week later, I got accused. Somebody asked me, they said, I returned some books that I had borrowed from the library, which I always did on time, at the monastery library. And I was accused of, they said, where is the other book? Or some other book. And I said, what do you mean some other book? And he said, this one is still missing. And I said, no, I returned all the books that I had, that I checked out, all of them. And they kept claiming that I had checked out this one book that I'd never checked out. And I'm pretty sure that at that time I was very certain that I had never checked it out. And if I had checked it out, I was absolutely positive I had returned it. And I definitely, but they started accusing me of maybe stealing it. And I said I had a car break-in and maybe someone took something, but I said I am positive that I returned this book because I just brought it back such and such a date. And so that was sort of frustrating. It was like, a year earlier I'd been, questioned about the missing diamond. Then I'm questioned about the missing irreplaceable ancient book, which I never took. And what am I going to do? And I was selling books. I was an entrepreneur in book selling. I slept on a very, very small scale. And I was selling books at the time. And I thought, well, do they think that I'm just taking their books and trying to resell them? Taking their library books and trying to sell them on Amazon.com? Because I wasn't. And so, of course, the book, they just dropped it after a while. But then I thought, maybe that's getting added to this whole undercover investigation thing. So basically, this whole thing of putting me under investigation, it was before I ever even decided to protest. It was after I found out that they had done that to me, smeared me to the police, just to make me look bad, that I decided, I actually prayed about it, and I decided I should go up there one day